Hey team, welcome back to another episode of the Strength Game Podcast. I'm your host, Nick O'Brien, and this is episode number 15. The Strength Game is a weekly podcast dedicated to discussing all things physical culture with the coaches, athletes, iron enthusiasts, and experts deeply embedded in the strength game on both sides of the profession, both as coaches and as competitive athletes. I want to thank everyone who has liked, shared, and commented. Your feedback and support allows us to continue to bring on expert guests and highlight more individuals in the strength game, just like our guests today. I also want to thank our sponsor, Cerberus Strength. Trusted since 2012, Cerberus is making the best strongman, powerlifting, and strength sports equipment and accessories, ensuring the ultimate competitive edge. Every one of their products is tried, tested, and proven by top-level athletes worldwide. So whether it's competing on the big stage at World's Strongest Man or training at home in the gym, Cerberus Strength equipment is reliable, durable, and of course, strong enough to handle all your training goals and needs. So if you're in the market for the highest quality strength and conditioning gear and equipment, be sure to check out CerberusStrength.com and use promo code STRENGTH_game to save on your next order. In this week's episode, I'm joined by a friend of mine and fellow strength coach, Matt Cox. Matt is currently a performance coach at UC San Diego, where he oversees the training for all the aquatic sports, including the men's and women's rowing, swimming and diving, and water polo teams. Prior to his current position, Cox served as a graduate assistant strength coach at the University of Hawaii. He's also spent time as an intern at Fresno State University, Marshall University, and UCLA. He's a former college wrestler who competed at Fresno City College before transferring to Campbell University, and now he currently competes in Brazilian Jiu Jitsu. He's a three-time International Brazilian Jiu Jitsu Foundation World Championship competitor with a brown belt from 10th Planet, holding a professional record of 7-1. Like I said, I'm excited to have him on the show today. So with all that said, let's get in the game with Matt Cox. What's going on, everybody? I'm joined today with another West Coast living strength coach and colleague of mine, Matt Cox. What's going on, man? Thanks for coming on the show today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Hey, so I want to jump right into it. I know there's been a lot of stuff going on. I want to get into your background and how kind of COVID is impacting what you guys are doing at UCSD. But first, I really want to get a little bit of intro. How'd you kind of get into training? What eventually got you involved in jiu-jitsu, and like what sports did you play growing up?
Yeah, it's a good question. So my cousin wrestled in elementary school, and I always looked up to him. So I started wrestling. And, I was so bad, growing up. Like, I think I lost, like, every match through elementary school. And, for some reason, I just kind of stuck with it. I love the sport. It was just something about it, about fighting someone and just, like, the combat I really got into. And, I wrestled from elementary through college. And once I was done, I just kind of, like, had a void in my life. So I started doing jiu-jitsu, and I honestly like jiu-jitsu way more than wrestling. There's just more options out there, and, I fell in love with it.
Yeah, that's cool to hear. I know, especially after college, it's a weird kind of spot to be in. Like, what do you do after athletics? And I know a lot of people kind of drift towards either finding something new, and it's not the same atmosphere to just go to the gym and train like everybody was doing before. Like, you miss that team atmosphere, or you miss having a goal or something that you can actually strive for. And that's cool to hear that you found something and found something probably better than what you enjoyed doing as college wrestling. So I want to kind of get into it. Like, at the same time, you went to school, you transferred to Campbell University, and then you got your degree in exercise science there. Did you know, like, you wanted to get into coaching at that point in time, or like, what were your kind of thoughts leading into picking a career as a strength coach?
You know what? I had no idea what I wanted to do. And, that's kind of like the degree that a lot of the athletes were taking. And, one of my roommates, she was on the lacrosse team at Campbell, and her girlfriends came over to the house one day, and one of them was just like, "Hey, you should help us with our weights." And of course, I was just like, "Yeah, that's a great idea." So I started volunteering, and it was just so fulfilling. Growing up, when I started lifting weights, I almost I liked it as much as wrestling. I just loved training, trying to push myself and just develop my body for combat. And so when I started realizing oh, people train people for a living, it was just so cool for me. And after that first internship, I knew for sure that I was doing this for the rest of my life.
That's awesome. Yeah, I know. I think that's pretty much how I fell into it. I know injuries kind of sidelined me from my college career, like playing, but that's a cool transition to kind of see it. And I felt the same way. Like that, I didn't really know I wanted to be in coaching. I kind of went to school for athletic training, and I realized pretty much within the first day that's not what I wanted to do. And coaching, like being in the weight room or seeing the development and the fulfilling aspect of actually training. And then I think it's even for me, I like seeing athletes train more and seeing them kind of achieve their goals. And I know you're the same way. And I know you've been on a lot of stops leading to your place now at UCSD, and there you work with all the aquatic sports, which is kind of a unique position compared to a lot of places where you might only have swim or you might only have dive or one of those teams sporadically, but you have pretty much everything that touches the water at UCSD. So kind of talk a little bit about the differences in sports performance training for aquatic sports. We kind of know a lot of people when they regurgitate training philosophy and like what they actually do, they're saying, oh, it's ground based, it's multi-directional movements, it's multi-joint, but a lot of your sports, that is completely void of it, and it's unique to kind of see. So how do you go about training? What are the differences kind of with your sports that you have?
So yeah, I mean, I work with swim, water polo, rowing, diving's a part of the swim team. And first off, I train them like athletes. We're hitting every pattern, and there's not that much difference between the sports that are ground based and aquatics. But the aquatics, they don't experience these eccentric forces in their feet and stuff like that. So we're not doing a ton of drills to create stiffness there, like pogos and things like that. There are specifics that we work on more, but as far as when people talk about sport specific training, I'm not super crazy about it because I'm developing the athlete and what does that athlete need. So, I mean, we can talk about, for swimming and polo, they're both overhead athletes. There's a ton of internal rotation of the shoulder, and we've got to get the scap strong. We have to work on T-spine mobility, work on the shoulders, just to try to protect them, making sure the internal to external strength is there. Um, it requires a lot of retraction and things like that. But other than that, for swimming, the different disciplines, the sprinters are going to be doing more of your heavy lifting, dynamic stuff. The distance on the other end is going to be doing a little bit more metabolic work. And the mid distance is going to be kind of the hybrid in between those. And, for swimming and polo, they move through their lumbar in the water. So I think a ton of bilateral movements are not necessarily the best for them. There are certainly some athletes that can handle it, but as much as I can, I would like to prioritize the single leg movements. And, that's a battle because I haven't met that many people that just thoroughly enjoy lunging and doing step ups compared to deadlifts and squats. It's just instincts, there's ego. I find myself squatting and deadlifting more than I do lunges, even though I truly believe that there's a lot of benefits to the single leg movements. But, that's just something that I'm trying to push. And even so, I would say for the mid distance and distance, like upper body might be more of a priority. I think in general, when you think of training athletes, it's like leg development. But for them, it's like, man, we're doing a lot of pull-ups. We're doing a lot of single arm pushes and, rotational power things. And, obviously we're doing legs, but I think if you looked at the program, you'd be like, wow, you're doing a lot of upper body. And so I think that's a little bit unique for swimming. Obviously, the sprinters and the breaststrokers and divers, they're going to be doing more legs, but, for the mid distance, it's a little bit more upper for me. And then when you're talking about polo, it's a pretty full body. There's a lot of contact, which we can talk about how some of my mixed martial arts has gone into that. But, the same thing for the shoulders, like the center defenders and the 2-meter players and goalies, they're going to be doing a lot more legs. But the field players, they're doing more dynamic strength movements and things like that. But again, they're still athletes. We're still hitting every pattern, just like I'm sure most of your athletes are hitting. And then for rowing, that's a unique sport. It's one of the only sports that's bilateral. I think powerlifting, rowing, there might be a couple more, but, we're definitely squatting with them. They're on 2 feet the whole time. So, and it's unique because they're so tight in the boat with their feet that it's just crazy for their hips. Like they are so tight, it's incredible. So we're doing a lot of your shin box series and, different things to try to open up the hips. We do wide stance box squats, single leg movements that is kind of just to open them up more. But it's kind of cool that, they are, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of people that are against bilateral stuff because it's like, oh, you're never on 2 feet. These people are on 2 feet. So those are kind of, some of the differences with the aquatics for these sports.
That's interesting. Yeah, that's really cool to hear. I like how you take that approach and it's not necessarily sport specific. Like we're not talking about you taking a band and tying it to a tennis racket and calling it tennis sport specific training, stuff like that. You're breaking down the sport and you're kind of reverse engineering it, and you're seeing what they need. Like, rowers are really tight. Like, what's the point of doing narrow deadlifts and getting them close together and squatting super tight? They already do that in their sport thousands of times. You'll never be able to replicate it. And if anything, you're probably doing more harm. So to kind of balance it out and make them healthier and train them just like athletes, that's cool to hear. And like you talked about, I saw you doing it the other day, and you talked about the ego stuff, like trying to get some of those big bilateral lifts in. But then I like how you threw that twist on it, doing trap bar, split stance deadlifts. Like that's a great one to kind of add into there. You kind of feed both dogs at the same time. Like you get to load it up a little bit, but at the same time you're checking off the box and you're doing you're close to a single leg exercise, a unilateral exercise at that point. Maybe it's 80-20, whatever it is, but you're feeding both beasts with that point. And that's a cool thing to kind of see. And you kind of touched on it a little bit. I mean, you have an extensive background. I think what you've been wrestling and jujitsu, combined, combative sports for over 18 years, combined. So, and if for those that don't know, can you explain a little bit what actually goes on under the water and water polo, and then explain a little bit of how you training your jujitsu and your grappling skills go hand in hand? Because I think a lot of people don't understand that.
Oh, you know what? Yeah, water polo is intense. They are basically fighting under the water. They have to be pretty careful with it above the water. There's a lot of fouls called, but there's a lot of wrestling, a lot of grip fighting, and just things like that I'm pretty familiar with, just going through wrestling my whole life. So I've actually done some cool things with them. Pre-COVID, we would do weekly training sessions we called it the mat room, and we would essentially wrestle, do some jiu-jitsu, boxing, and it was really cool just to get them a little bit out of their element while still doing things relevant for their sport. And we're doing grip breaks, doing things like that. We're doing intervals. So we're doing some metabolic training, which is helping get them fit, and they're having fun while they're doing it. It's, maybe some of them didn't love it, but most of them just had a great time, kind of fighting their teammates. And, we're doing boxing with the catch mitts, just teaching them basic combos, which is doing a ton for their shoulders and for their conditioning. And, it was really cool to do that. We would, they do some drills in the water where they're wrestling, and they're called jousting. And it's just really cool to kind of blend those together, and having them just spar, getting close and being comfortable. It's different in the water. I mean, I jumped in the water with them a few times, and, as soon as they start to touch me, it's like I'm about to drown, so it's different, but, they appreciate it, and they think it's all pretty good for them. So we're going to try to keep doing it whenever we can. So currently we're not doing any wrestling, obviously.
Of course. Yeah, that makes sense. That's cool to hear, though. If you flip that, though, I know that you getting in the water is a little bit different with them, but have you kind of seen the impact that your background and that jousting and sprawl, all the kind of wrestling technique in the water has helped them? Have you kind of in turn seen, or have you done anything for yourself, swimming wise, to see if that's in turn helps your jujitsu a little bit?
You know what? I haven't looked at it like that. I've made attempts to swim and to row and to get in the water with the polo players, and, just kind of expose myself as one, just to kind of make a fool of myself and get some laughs out of it. And then just to kind of try to understand a little bit more about what it feels like. The first time I got in the water and did a small swim set, to say the least, my obliques were on fire. It was pumped, and I was like, wow, I didn't even, realize I would, this was something this crucial, and I've done it more just to try to understand, but I haven't really done it in the reverse, like you just asked.
I gotcha. That's cool. Well, now, kind of speaking on it, I know you can't do those sort of things right now with COVID going on, and you and I both know that in the great state of California, restrictions are super tight. I mean, right now I'm in quarantine myself, and I know you've been training outside for predominantly this whole period since athletes have returned. So can you kind of explain what UCSD is doing with their athletic performance unit, and how your training philosophy kind of works into this new model?
Yeah. So yeah, things are so different from what we're used to. Generally we would have hour lifts in the weight room, 3 teams at a time. Now everything's outdoors, pretty spaced out. We have individual squares for each athlete to train in safely, with their own piece of equipment, which is a lot. So we're moving all kinds of weight around every day, and we're not training the teams individually, but rather stimulus based. So essentially we have 5 training times a day, and we have several different types of stimulus. So the goal is to provide the correct stimulus for the athlete. So we're trying to make it meaningful and give them exactly what they need. And we call it a IPP, an individualized performance plan. And essentially this is a plan that we put together with our body team, which is the athletic trainer, the performance coach, and the sport coach. And, we talk about their movement competency, their training age, their overall development, the needs of the sport, of their position. How do they profile? So what kind of measures did we take? Force plate jumps, movement screens, everything that goes into this pile. And we try to look at it and say, okay, Nick, you need this and this to be successful at what you do. We believe this is what's going to be important for you. So now we take your class schedule and we say, okay, Monday, 8:45, you're taking body weight strength. Tuesday, you're going to take power. Wednesday, you're going to take body weight strength again, and so on. So it's it's a way to try to give you the right stimulus. So we believe it's specific for you. It's kind of when you have all these different athletes in the class, it's kind of like, well, maybe we're all just doing the same thing, but it's like, no, we're giving you the exact classes for the stimulus we think that's appropriate for you to develop. So, with that being said, I can kind of talk about the types of classes we have. So we have a strength class. So we have a body weight, which is, capacity driven. It's learning the movements. How can you move your body? Can you do a push-up? Can you hinge well? Can you do all these different things? We put a metabolic component to it. So can you get this many reps in this amount of time? Does it still look good after you've done 50 push-ups? Like sort of like certain criteria that we have. And if an athlete can go through this, it's like, okay, you're ready for the Bodyweight Plus program. This is where we start to provide external load. It's still light. We're trying to see if the patterns still stick. So did you actually move or like learn the movements? And are you starting to develop a little bit of strength? And, we have different parameters for this. The reps and the goal times are different. And once an athlete can go through that, it's like, okay, we put you into the hybrid program. The hybrid's like kind of the blend between sort of this like light load and a max strength class. So now you're getting more load, off of your body weight. And, still can you still hinge with this weight? Can you do all these movements, do it correctly, look good, execute it well? And if so, then it's like, okay, now we might move you up to the max strength class. And this is where, like you saw in one of my videos, there's open end trap bars. We have landmines. We have a couple different things who are providing more of like a max effort type of class. And, the goal is obviously to get the athlete stronger. And there's potential for us to have like more of a dynamic strength class when after a while, once we get the athletes through these max strength classes for a while. So that's just like one category. Second category, we have metabolic control. So the purpose of this class is to develop total body awareness. So we have drops, hops, and chops. That's like kind of like the base. So we're doing a lot of, absorbing landings. We're doing chopping variations and just trying to get you to move your body under control. And when we're doing this and we're doing it correctly, trying to get down to these positions with, stiff and tight, we're adding a metabolic component to it. So it's, a way to work on our fitness and to actually just be able to absorb forces, which is, there's a lot of it in sport that I think we might miss in the weight room a lot of the times. We might jump off a box once in a while, but are we planting and doing all these different movements to develop control? And, it's a great class. I have a lot of my athletes are in it, but I have my rowers in it a lot because rowing is literally just control of your body the whole way. There's no eccentric force, but it's just like, if you're in the wrong position, you're probably going to screw up your back. Like, it's just like such a huge thing in rowing. Like, there's so much extension in the movement that like the lumbar everything just has to be solid. So, and obviously there's a huge fitness component to that class. And then we have, what else do we have? We have a horizontal class, which is we're using exergenius. We kind of talked about that the other day, but, essentially we're adding external load and we're doing different skipping drills, different types of lunging, different types of bear crawls, which is just another way to develop the lower body while moving, which is great for all the, the soccers and the baseballs. And, I have my athletes in there that need a little bit more legs. It's a great way to provide lower body strength without too much axial loading. So that's another option. And we have a power class. So we have that, a foundational class, which focuses on, concepts for acceleration and running and different types of skipping and bounds and things like that. And then we have the more advanced class where, things just progress. We're going to do more sprinting, more flying 20s and plyos and things like that. It's just like when having two options of the class, it's like, okay, you've gone through this class for this many weeks, you're ready for the next one. So we're not giving you too much. We're always trying to just provide the right stimulus and not overcook someone, because, I'm sure we've all experienced this, putting an athlete through a little too much, and that's when things start to break down. So we're never trying to exceed the capacity of what they can handle. And we have, we have a lot of classes. I'm trying to think. We have a change of direction class, and, obviously that's, a lot of the sports that have to cut are going to take this course because it's very necessary for the sport, making cuts in soccer and things like that. And, we have a foundational course, and then we have an application course where it's a little bit more of the advanced athletes that can do more reaction-based stuff. And we're starting to offer primer courses, which is, let's say, I didn't mention this, but we're trying to get the athletes to do APU 5 days a week, so training every single day, just to give them little doses. And if they have a game, we're calling them primer courses, to where, we have a coach off to the side, takes them. You might do some heavy singles or some velocity-based work. Usually I would give my athletes their pick. So it's like, okay, pick your favorite lower body, your favorite push, your favorite pull, 3 heavy singles. We might be using tendos to kind of say it's got to stay within this range. Or they can just have a little tendo race if that's what they think makes them feel good. And then we'll probably pair it with some type of plyometric just to get the nervous system firing, send them on their way. Session might be 30 minutes, if they have a game that day. And we're also offering recovery sessions to where, after a game, we really don't know how many games we're going to have this year, but, in theory, someone has a game, next day they come in, we do some more recovery work where it's kind of like your very low end plyo sort of walking lunge, with rotations, maybe not quite as much foam rolling and things like that they would want, but trying to get them in a heart rate zone that's low for an extended period of time to kind of promote the blood flow.
Gotcha.
And I think that's all the classes we're offering.
That's a big selection. That's interesting.
Yeah, it's cool because it's like people on the same team, they might be taking different classes. So they still play the same sport, but between the sport coach, the athletic trainer, and myself, we say, okay, this person needs this because they do this and they're not good at this in the water and whatever. And it's also a way to empower the sport coach, just to have them be a part of the process and not just feel like, all right, I'm sending them to weights 2 times a week or 3 times a week and I'm losing this many hours. They feel a little bit more part of the process, if that makes sense.
No, that makes complete sense. I didn't even think of that aspect of it. And I think that's a really good point. You do, being in this profession long enough, you get coaches on both sides of the spectrum. You'll get the ones that say, I don't care what you do. You pick how many days I want them in the weight room, and then just kind of get them out of my hair. Don't hurt them. Bring them back to me. And then you get the ones that are overzealous, that want to be at every session, kind of question what you do or want to dictate what you do. I think this is a perfect kind of marriage between the two, where those coaches know their athletes better than definitely we do. They see them a lot. We see them a lot as well. But at the end of the day, they're trying to play their sport to the best of their ability. So for them to have an input and say, and even in their terms, I don't know water polo terms very well, but to say it in their terms, this is what we're doing in the pool. I want this kind of stimulus. This is where this athlete's lacking it. And then be perfect. This is the class we'll put them in. This is what we can actually stress with it. And I think it goes hand in hand with what you said in the beginning with aquatic sports. You're still training them like athletes, so they can be in classes. They can be in your APU format with different sports, with people that are not on their team as well, which is another kind of hidden benefit, that they get to work with other athletes on campus and not necessarily just be confined to their own team the whole time. At the end of the day, I think everything we do in the weight room is GPP in some sort of format. And it's kind of cool to see this kind of shape out. I think like a lot of basketball schools or like people that train basketball at a higher level have started to kind of take that microcycle, like where it's just every single day you're doing a little bit of this, a little bit of this, and touching on everything. And I think it's a great format. And I'm interested. I'll have to talk to you more about it later too, to see after, hopefully when post COVID, how this kind of has changed your guys' whole philosophy. But we got to wait for COVID to kind of finish up first.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see. We're interested in keeping this going. You know, maybe we have sessions in the weight room, but it still might be stimulus based.
Definitely.
So we'll see.
Yeah. So I want to kind of touch on a little bit of what you've been doing as well. Like, I know you kind of talked about filling that void when you were done with wrestling, and you said you found a new love for jiu-jitsu and probably care for it a lot more than you did wrestling training. Why did you end up like choosing to train and compete? Like, what got you involved in jiu-jitsu? And then like from that point in time, like how does that kind of balance with your coaching?
Yeah, so I mean, once I was done wrestling, I was obviously into strength training. I was trying to get my powerlifting numbers up. I did my master's at the University of Hawaii. You know, we even had some small powerlifting meets, and you know, it was cool. It was hurting my shoulders a lot, but my buddy James, who I worked with, he's the strength coach at San Diego State now. He got me into jiu-jitsu. He was bugging me for like half a year. I went one day and I competed the next month. I was like, wow, this is cool. Like, you know, and since then I've been training it every day almost. You know, I just fell in love with it. And yeah, and it works really well with my schedule here. So, you know, we have early mornings. I think every strength coach does, but I'm pretty much done in the mid-afternoon, and I train in the evenings. You know, I have a session at 4:30 and 6:30 every night. So I'm getting home 8:30, take a shower, go to bed, and just repeat. You know, it's kind of a vicious cycle at times, but you know, I thrive in it. I love to push myself, and you know, I just feel like I'm a competitive person. You know, and it's just like being a strength coach. It's competitive because you have to be on your A game. You have to be sharp. You know, and obviously competing at a somewhat of a high level. You know, you have to be taking it serious. So I think there's positives to doing both of them together.
Definitely. Yeah, I didn't realize you went that quick right into competition, but I know you had a pretty extensive wrestling background, so it fit well. And then up to this point now, you've been a competitor at IBJJF, what, 3 years now?
Yeah. Unfortunately, they didn't have it this year, but that's a fun tournament. I'm determined to try to make it on that podium at some point. It's tough though. You know, there's obviously that's like the world championships, you know, and they have it for each respected belt level. So every year I've been going, it's just getting tougher and tougher. So we'll see.
That's cool. Well, hopefully you get to go this year.
Yeah.
Yeah. So selfishly, I kind of, before COVID hit, I was starting to dabble in jujitsu, like prior to everything going down. And I don't think at a white belt level, you can really train by yourself at home. Try to do some of the virtual things, not going well. When you don't have anything to practice on, you really don't have a teacher. I can kind of see the flip side of the coin why. Having a coach is very important. So kind of like from your point of view, I know when you first started wrestling, it was a long time ago. And so you had a little bit of background when you got into jiu-jitsu, but what kind of advice do you have for someone maybe interested in getting involved in it or any other form of mixed martial arts or grappling sport? What would you say to them? Like, what are the best keys to kind of just get on the mat right away?
Show up. Like I know so many people that have just, they're like, oh man, I want to try that. I want to try it. And they talk about this for years sometimes, you know. There's a lot of people interested, but they just don't commit to showing up. And I feel like almost every single person that I've met that like tries it is just like, wow, this is dope. And they start training. Maybe they don't compete. Maybe they just like to do it recreationally, but I feel like most people have enjoyed it. There's just something unique about it when you're sparring with someone. It's very humbling. And athletics is incredible. I feel like there's cool things about every sport, but with fighting sports, it's different to me because sometimes you don't just lose, but you get your butt kicked. Like it's not the same when someone beats you up. There's just this different feeling, and for me, it just like sparked something different in me. It's just, to me, it's so much more competitive for, like, I shouldn't say it's more competitive because every sport is, can be taken to the highest level, but something about it is just so unique. And, I fell in love with it, I guess, when I was young, elementary school.
That's cool to hear. It's since I'm not very involved in it, it seems like it's pretty close to it feels like life and death a little bit. And that's how, to my wrestlers, a lot of times, like, it's more than just a sport to them. And I think it's the time you spend on the mat. Like, I think it's the intimacy of like being, like, touching someone and having to grapple and being in close contact. And it's one of those sports that, for sure, like all the grappling sports and combative ones, it definitely seems like you just can't have an ego going into it. So it kind of sheds it, but at the same time, then it raises the level. So like you said, I don't know if it's more competitive than anything, but winning and losing has a higher cost, like not just like the risk level of getting injured or everything, but I think the emotional and psychological stress that you have when you win is higher, when you lose is lower. And
It's
I think
definitely lower
that
because, like, when your girlfriend watches you get your butt kicked at the dual meet, it's different than losing a soccer match, Like, there's a different level, just like you explained.
yeah, and you're by yourself too. So whether you win or lose, you can't really point the finger at anyone else. Like, it's all on you at the end of the day, which is different.
Yeah.
Hey, so with that too, like, one of the last things I really wanted to touch on with, you compete at a really high level, and at the same time, your athletes are doing that as well. Do you see any sort of buy-in or extra kind of like influence that you have with your athletes, knowing that they understand that you're doing the same thing as them, maybe in a different sport, but you're training just as hard. You're focusing on your nutrition, your sleep, and everything. Basically, you're leading by example. So do you see any sort of kind of positive feedback to that from your athletes?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. Obviously, trying to compete at a high level, I think it keeps me sharp. I'm doing all these things that I try to preach to my athletes about taking care of their bodies, having the right mindsets going into training, all of these different variables that we want them to do. I'm trying to do it myself. So I think I can relate to them in a way just because I'm still doing it. And, I would say it's similar, like the level that I'm competing is, what Division One athletes are doing. So I believe that we can relate on that level. Um, it's unique being a competitor and coaching at the same time. I've had some of my athletes come to some of my professional fights, which is really cool. For me, it's like the opposite of what normally happens. And I'll give a shout out to my women's crew team. They always show up to my fights and make signs for me and try to show me some support. And it's been cool. So I know that a lot of them kind of believe in me in the sense that I'm trying to do everything and I'm testing things out that I give them. And, I think it makes it unique. I don't think you have to compete or to even have ever played a sport to be a strength coach. But for me, I think it helps a lot. It helps with the buy-in. It helps with the trust. It helps that they know I'm serious about this and that I'm doing what I can for them.
Yeah, that's cool to hear. That's great to see that there's a mutual respect between the coaches and the athletes. Like, you guys are both competing at a sport. You're both trained. You're putting everything on the line for those. and it's cool to see, like, I know you support them just as much at their meets and during their games. It's kind of cool to be on the other flip end of it and have someone kind of buy into that, because not many sports outside of like the big three in the US are really getting big cash payouts. Obviously you're still a coach for a reason. You're not just a professional like jujitsu athlete right now. So one of them's got to fit the bill for travel and for training purposes still. So
Oh,
that's
I'm definitely not making that much from jiu-jitsu.
I hear you. Hey, so a little bit, how do you kind of continue to sharpen the sword and everything? I know, like you talked about like your long days. I mean, all coaches kind of know we're in the fire the whole time, and then you're going to training twice a day a lot of times. Like, where do you find time, and like what do you do, or who do you lean on for jiu-jitsu advice, or for coaching and strength conditioning, or even personally? Like, what are your favorite resources to lean on?
I mean, for jiu-jitsu, I don't have to go anywhere. I mean, my coach at 10th Planet is incredible, Richie Martinez. I'll try to do some seminars when I can to like learn from some of the other guys that are really good. But, between just the San Diego area with the 10th Planets, we have some of the top ranked fighters in the world. So I just trust in my coaches. That's pretty much it. I don't travel too much to learn from other people. And for strength and conditioning, um, I try to do some professional development every year. Pick a topic. What me and my boss think I could improve on. Do some of these things. It's all kind of virtual right now. I just completed the Joel Jamieson cert not too long ago for conditioning, and kind of had the gears revving for that. I read his book, MMA Conditioning, back in the day, and it was kind of just like a step forward from that. And it's got the gears turning. Going to try to get into some leadership certifications just so I can kind of command my voice better and do some things just to help lead them and things like that. I'm interested in everything. I use Instagram a lot for strength and conditioning. I'm following all these people. Vernon, what's his last name? I'm terrible with names. Vernon, yeah, he's got some great stuff. I follow him. I try to do all his hip flow things. Like I was saying earlier with the water polo and the rowing with the tight hips, like just some of that stuff has been incorporated, and I love it. It's got great stuff, but I'm just constantly looking. I don't have anything specific. I'm trying to do podcasts more. I've been tuning in to yours, which has been really cool. There's some others, but just what I can. It's super busy being a coach and trying to compete professionally, and then to also try to learn. But I have a great coaching staff at UCSD that I get to work with. My bosses are incredible. They've been to some great places, and just learning from them has been incredible for me.
Yeah, it's great to kind of find those people to lean on, and being surrounded by a staff like that are putting together like this APU course, and you guys are collaborating together and gives you feedback of stuff to work on. Like, that's probably your best bet. I mean, everything you're doing, you're learning on the job, you're learning when you go to training. Those are the best things you can do. Like, a lot of times I think we focus on things that are out of our reach and farther, maybe look shinier, but honestly, the stuff that you're surrounded with day in and day out are probably your best bet for learning. So, hey, we finished, and I appreciate you listening to the show too.
Yeah, of course.
And then, hey, so then you probably already know, then we finished the show like any good training session with a finisher. So we got 4 quarters, 4 questions, and definitely we'll do overtime. We'll do an extra roll at the end. So, hey, we'll go right into it. And you might have answered one of them already, but biggest influence in strength conditioning and biggest influence in BJJ.
Biggest influence in strength and conditioning is Matt Cox, my boss. Biggest influence, BJJ, is Richie Martinez.
Yeah, we'll roll right into it. There we go. Hey, what can you be found doing? What are some of your hobbies? I know you're competing all the time, you're coaching all the time, but when you actually have time for other stuff, what are you doing?
Um, I'm playing League of Legends on the computer. It's pretty nerdy. I love it. Just playing some video games on the side. This sounds, yeah, I'll say it anyways. I'll do Zumba once in a while, which is pretty crazy. I'll do it with my athletes once in a while. And I mean, for the female athletes, it's like pre-workout. They just get hype, and we end up having a great training session after. So if I have any free time, I'll try to learn a new Zumba song and show it for them. Have them do the dance and start the session. That's like our warm up sometimes, which has been really cool.
I did not see that one coming.
I know you didn't. I was like, man, should I say this? I don't know.
Hey, whatever works, whatever gets the job done. I like it. Hey, so you might have put some thought in this one. If you weren't coaching and in strength conditioning, do you have an idea of what you would be doing? And since you got to pick a few sports, if it wasn't BJJ, was there another one that you would have picked, a different sport?
To do now or to like grow up and do?
Either or. Yeah, whatever you'd pick.
I mean, I love water polo. I don't know if I would be good because I'm a terrible swimmer, but just getting to like work with the polo athletes at UCSD and seeing all the games, like it's such a cool sport that if I wasn't wrestling, if I could have did that, I think that would have been fulfilling.
What if you weren't coaching? Did you have any backup profession, or is it just ride jujitsu?
Oh man, I think in my mind I was thinking like personal trainer, and thinking about that now, like I just would hate it. I love training athletes who are getting ready for competition, and training someone for aesthetics and to look good is just like, for me, I couldn't see myself doing that. But in my mind, that's kind of what I was planning on doing, maybe.
I gotcha. Hey, so if you set up an ideal training session, it might be different from actually being on the mat compared to like being in the weight room. But what's your go-to training music and what's your go-to post-training meal?
Training music, um, I like a lot of electronic music. I like drum and bass. Um, a lot of the popular things that you'll hear on the radio, but pretty much anything electronic, dubstep or something like that. And post-training meal, you know, um, I mean, I've been having these protein shakes that are Fruity Pebbles flavor from Dymatax, I think. Yeah, the ISO 100 ones, and I know that's not a training meal, but I love having that shake after training. It just feels like I'm putting the right thing in my body.
There you go. All right. Hey, last thing I got for you for a little bit of overtime. So, most valuable piece of advice you've received. It can be coaching, personal, training wise, and then if you want to share who it actually came from.
Best advice I've been given. Um, oh man, this is stumping me. I've learned a lot from many people. I in high school, I had a lot of injuries in wrestling, and it took me out of the state tournament my junior and senior year, and it was so taxing mentally just to like work so hard to have it cut from you. I had aspirations of placing at the state tournament. I was just like, man, I feel like almost every year wrestlers debate if they should quit because it's just so hard. And like, I was like, oh, I'm done. And I remember I was at the state tournament watching, and, I was walking outside. I was on crutches because I had surgery on my knee. And the junior college coach, Paul Keesaw, comes up to me and he goes, hey, we're going to sign you up, you know, hopefully next week to come on down. And I'm like, what? Like, what are you talking about? He goes, oh no, you love this. Like, you're not quitting. I know you're coming. And, he basically was just like, no, you're too tough. Like, you're not ready to quit. And just hearing him kind of say that, like, fired me up. And I was like, yeah, let's do this. So I ended up competing in junior college after I thought about quitting, just after all the injuries and, never, um, getting fulfilled. I told you I was pretty bad at wrestling growing up. I got better, and like it was kind of always stripped away from me before ever achieving anything that I thought was meaningful. And I just kept pushing, kept grinding, and finally I'm kind of having some success, to be honest. Like, I wasn't that good of an athlete growing up, but it's kind of paid off lately. So Paul Keesaw.
That's awesome. That's a great story. What is that? I think it's the old Dan Gable quote. It's like, if you can do wrestling, everything else in life is easy. I definitely butchered it, but it goes something like that.
No, yeah, that's it. I've heard that many times. And, people say that about a lot of different things, and I believe that can be true for other sports, but man, I have to think that like wrestling might be a little harder than some of the other sports out there. So.
After watching the guys and getting on the mat and then getting my ass handed to me as a white belt, I can attest that it's pretty difficult. Hey, well, again, I want to thank you, for coming on today. And can you kind of share how people can kind of stay in touch with you? I'll put all your contact info below, but how can guys follow you, come out to some of your fights and everything too? How can they follow you on social media?
Yeah, Instagram, see Matt Cox, give me a follow, and we can catch up, and then email m5cox@ucsd.edu. If you want to link up and chat about strength and conditioning or jiu-jitsu, just send me an email or message on there.
Awesome. Hey, Matt, I can't thank you enough, man, for coming on. We haven't seen each other in a bit since our Fresno days, so it's good to catch up and see what everything you got going on. Definitely gonna be picking your brain more as soon as COVID comes down and I can get back on the mat a little bit, but appreciate you listening and appreciate you coming on as a guest today, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Of course, man. Take it easy.
All right.
That's it for this episode of The Strength Game. Thank you again to this week's guest and to our sponsors, Cerberus Strength. Be sure to connect and keep up with our guests at the links in the description below. Remember to subscribe to us on Apple and Google Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcast provider to stay up to date on all future episodes. Also, check us out on YouTube and CoachO'Brien.com, where you can find all the video versions of these episodes, as well as show notes, episode schedule, and much more. Comments, ratings, and reviews are always welcome and appreciated. Thanks again for tuning in, and be sure to join us next week for another great episode of The Strength Game.